Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The silver light shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you listening on the Life Online Radio Network, we welcome you in. For those of you listening on YouTube, we welcome you in. Shout out to our sponsors, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. That's at Affinity WES on Twitter or on Facebook. They're there to help you with all your writing needs. Whether it be from editing an essay to helping you write an entire series, they have a whole spectrum worth of services. Now, I'll be honest. I've been having a week worth of nightmares. Not doing anything unusual. Nothing bothers me in my subconscious that I'm aware of. But I've been having nightmares. And the funny thing is, it's coming right when the world seems to be full of hope. There's a new vaccine that will deliver us all from the pandemic. That should be good news. That means that the economy can reopen and everybody will be making money and prosperous again. That should be good news. Snows are coming. That should be good news. Yes, I'm one of those people that likes snow and rain and things like that. Because snow and rain bring water. And water refills the reservoirs and keeps us from going without drinking water. Remember the rule of 2. You can go 2 minutes without air, 2 hours... Wait, how does this go again? It's 2 minutes without air, 2 days without water, 2 weeks without food, and I forget the other one. 2 hours without shelter or fire, I believe it is, but it depends on the situation. Back to what would be bothering me. There's a lot of things that bother me in this present situation that the world finds itself in. Florida, for example, without any controls or anything, has already reopened completely for business. Yes, it's another day for the people down there. Meanwhile, my current location, in the secret hidden underground bunker, we're locked down. And we're quite likely going to be locked down through Christmas. This doesn't really bother me. Yes, I'm going to miss seeing my family, but on the other hand, I realize my family are still going to be there the next year. And you should visit your family more than just on the holidays. So what is causing me nightmares? What is embedded in my psyche that I just can't quite work out in my conscious state? The fact is, it's a false finish. Yes, the vaccine is going to come out. People are going to take it. Willingly or unwillingly. And that's going to be one of the big points. How willing are people going to be to take the vaccine? We have Pfizer, who is rushing to produce this stuff, who I documented their failures and foibles before. But more importantly, before this was even announced, people were already stating that they didn't trust a vaccine. That anything that was rushed through was suspicious to them. The peculiar thing is that now governments are trying to offer documentation that says whether you've been vaccinated or not. This initially sounds like a good idea to figure out who has been vaccinated and who hasn't. But if you recall, we've had an entire, I don't even know what to call it, but this entire movement of people saying that they will not be vaccinated. They're not going to do it. And that's stemmed back from a long time. Now, there have been links between vaccines and some pretty terrible conditions like autism, Down syndrome. It runs the gamut. And, yeah, again, it's pretty terrible. Now, the problem is those studies have not been replicated. Vaccines are a very good and effective way of treating a lot of conditions. Chickenpox vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, all these, the measles, mumps, rubella, all fantastic. Polio, great vaccine. Help prevent a lot of kids from getting limbs amputated, from winding up in an iron lung. Fantastic. But they were all developed over time, and they were tested. We're not seeing this same technique being applied. We're figuring, we can just ram this thing through, stick it in people's arms, and deal with the consequences later. So I think this is the start of where my nightmares, my subconscious has been bothering me through nightmares. Let's look at what most people are looking forward to. Getting out of the jobs and going to work. Yes, people want to get out and earn money. They're tired of living on the amount the government has assigned to them. The amount the government thinks you are worth. And where I live, it's actually not that bad. Could be doing a little bit better, but I could be doing a lot worse. Some areas have virtually no financial assistance whatsoever. Right now, supposedly, the reason why the economy isn't doing well is because people don't have money, which is logical. If you're barely getting by day to day, you're not going to buy that big screen TV. You're not going to buy that new video game console. You're not going to buy anything that you don't absolutely need. But this is the problem. There's no orders in the system. Employers are going to start calling people back based off the orders that they get. And I use orders in a very loose sense. Whether your company makes chicken nuggets or whether your company makes sprockets, unless somebody has ordered them, you can't really produce anything because you're just going to wind up with an inventory with no sales available. The big three automakers, Chrysler, GM, and Ford, are still running on production. There are lots and acres and areas where these new cars are being parked, and no one's buying them. It was actually like this before 2020. Just acres and acres of these cars being just sitting there, doing nothing, not being sold, just sitting there. But the big three automakers are doing this to keep people going because they understand if people don't have jobs, they're not going to buy things, and if people don't buy things, the money doesn't go in the economy. Now, make no mistake, the big three automakers are out there for profit. They're not a charity. But why would they keep such huge inventories of cars on standby? Well, that's because we don't play in the big boys' economic box. How am I going to explain the big boys' economic box? Okay. So, for most people out there, aside from a few lucky people who might have a trust fund or something that funds them, everybody else has to go to some sort of work. Whether you're lucky enough to be one of those individuals that has found the career of your dreams and you love going to work every day, or you're somebody who trudges into work every day, hating what you do but needing to do it for the money, or anywhere in between. You go to work, you get paid, you go home. Either you spend your paycheck and cover your bills, or if you're one of the lucky ones, you have some money left over, and either you invest it in the future for an RRSP, GIC, 401k, whatever you might have, or you buy some luxury goods. Again, the TV, the new car, whatever it might be that suits your particular interest. And there's nothing wrong with buying a new car if you need one. There's a big debate out there about used versus new, and I have the opinion of buy what you need. It's your money. I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money. I'm just saying that cycle goes into our economy, and It keeps the chicken producers going. It keeps the farmers going. It keeps the people who feed their stuff into the dollar store happy. All those little plastic pencil sharpeners and garden gnomes that you can get for $1.50. That keeps them very happy. But it does not impact the real economy in any way, shape, or form. That's because you're not invited to the real economy. And I've said this before, but I don't think I've ever detailed it properly. See, the real economy doesn't deal in goods and services. You deal in goods and services because that's what's before you. But the real economy, the one that the billionaires and the high-end millionaires access, they don't worry about going to the corner store and getting a gallon of milk and a pack of biscuits. They have people to do that for them. Do you really think Elon Musk goes shopping with his kids? I pick on Elon Musk a lot in this program. Officially, I apologize to Elon Musk. Not about everything, but I apologize for using your name so much. But no, the upper 1%, they deal in speculation. Now, what is speculation, you ask? Well, there's a lot of levels of speculation. Probably the most common one would be currency speculation. Let's just take the US dollar and the European, oh my goodness, I can't remember what it's called, the euro. There are whole websites set out there, and all you do is you put your money down on whether that currency is going to go up or down. So let's pretend, as happened, where Donald Trump was elected out of office and Joe Biden was elected in. For a lot of people, that actually stabilizes the political situation in the United States. It doesn't. An election never stabilizes anything. It just puts another face that you listen to when they have news to go on the media. But for a lot of people's opinion, it placed somebody more stable in that position. Whether you agree with that statement or not, the US dollar would have risen against the euro. For those people who placed the order that said, I bet the stock is going to go up, they get their money in a tidy profit. Those people who bet against it, who said, I think that the euro is going to go down, they lose their money. So it's kind of like really gambling on a big scale. And you can do this in any time frame you like. You can set money down right now to come due in a month, 2 months, 6 months, or 5 minutes. Even a minute. The highest agencies, the Goldman Sachs of the world and stuff like that, they have automatic computers running this cycle every second of the day, making their money off of it. And their computers, you think we're doing good with artificial intelligence? You have no idea what the high-end banks can do. They have software systems in place that do nothing but game the system day in, day out, making money that goes into their coffers. And we all know banks have huge coffers. So these banks are constantly gaming the system, trading little things in little increments, because like that Superman movie where Richard Pryor programmed the computer to take each fraction of a cent and divert it to his account, all those fractions of a cent add up really fast. And the banks are in on that gigantic paycheck. I don't know whether they started doing it after the movie was out, or whether the person who wrote the movie knew something about it. It's an old movie. It's always hard to tell when something first started. But the fact is, it happens. And it's not just the banks doing it. The billionaires like Musk, Trump, McMahon, You name the really big houses, and they have people who do nothing all day but just manage those microtransactions for them. And in big enough numbers, they can make untold amounts of money. That's why when you look at the GDP, it says everybody in the country is making $60,000 a year. Man, woman, and child. This is simply not true. I've said it before, the unemployment rate, according to official statistics of people who have applied for assistance, is getting close to 50%. Even if all those people who had businesses before magically pick up and get back to work, that's 50% capacity that does not currently exist. In World War II, the United States had that much excess capacity, but they were selling everything for a moderate profit overseas. It's supposedly a Lend-Lease program, but realistically it was a rental program. We don't have this big untapped market available to us at the present time. The demand exists, but the finances to purchase it does not. Again, people aren't going out and running to buy big screen TVs. Whenever you get a big shock to the system like this, people are going to spend the first little while saving. Sure, they're going to go out and get little things like lobster and caviar, stuff like that. I don't blame people for allowing themselves a little treat after everything we've been through. It's only natural. But you're going out and purchasing things doesn't affect the cycle for the big people. You're only affecting your local businesses. And your local businesses are all going to be in trouble. Your lawn and gardening people might be okay, provided they took precautions and provided they went through this rigmarole and survived. Your local restaurants are struggling because they were a finicky business to begin with. I'm trying to think of what else is of it. Retail establishments. There we go. Retail establishments have been paying rent for the past 6 months unless they have extremely generous landlords, which there aren't very many of these days because landlords are in it to make a profit too. And as I said before, landlords still need to pay their staff, so they can't just bend over backwards and say, we'll take care of it. You just take this time off. No. The government subsidies are not even due to come out till the beginning of next year. So businesses have had to go literally a year, or it will be probably by the point you're listening to this. So businesses have had to go a year without any income. This means retail is pretty much dead. Now, what's going to happen, unless you're somebody massive like Hudson's Bay or Walmart that was able to keep some operations going and some revenue coming in, it's going to be a field day for the really big companies. The really big companies, I'm talking like Rayathon here. I'm talking like Bayer, like BASF, people we've mentioned before on this show. The reason why it's going to be a field day for them is because their bottom lines weren't impacted quite so severely. And whatever they want, they now have the capacity to purchase because it's going to go on the market for a discounted price. Pretend you and I own a lemonade stand. Sorry to make it so primitive, but you can actually make good money selling juice these days. So we've been running our lemonade stand. Obviously, for the past while, we haven't been able to run a lemonade stand. And so we have this booth. We have some glasses. We have some pitchers. We have some ice. And the lemons would have gone bad long ago. We wouldn't have replaced it because we haven't had any customers. McDonald's comes along and says, we like that lemonade stand. What were you making off of that? We say $40,000 a year. Again, pretend, I don't know how much a lemonade stand makes, but let's say $40,000 a year. It's a niche market. People love it. And you're along a good runner's route. So you say $40,000 a year. McDonald's says, we'll buy it off of you. Now, you and I are not in very good financial circumstances. So, okay, how much are you going to offer us? McDonald's says, we'll give you $20,000 for it. You and I know that the business is worth more, but we don't have the money to get it to reopen. So we look at each other. We know we can make more money with the business, but we don't have the money to restart it. Do we take this lowball offer, or do we try and look for something else? And most owners are in the situation where they know if they restart, they still are going to get shut down for something else sooner or later. They'll take the buyout, especially if McDonald's does anything to sweeten it. But then in return for that, McDonald's, the big company, now owns that lemonade stand and all the intellectual property. If we had any sort of marketing savvy where we had lemonade stand brand incorporated, they now own that brand. And they can start selling it in all the McDonald's as home brewed, micro brewed, all these buzzwords that they can use. So what they picked up for $20,000, they're now making $10 million every year because people are saying, oh, I remember this stuff. Word of mouth spreads. They have a couple advertising campaigns and lemonade becomes the next big thing. All for pennies on the dollar for the big company. Acquisition of small business is what keeps the big businesses alive. In transportation, there's what's called the point system. You have a certain number of points, and every time a driver gets into an accident, God forbid, or gets caught by the police, the highway patrol, and is out of compliance, you lose a certain number of those points. Well, there's a sneaky trick that companies use. There's a lot of small companies in transportation, and they still have to pony up and say, yes, we're a transportation company, get their registration number, and they get their points. Well, if the big company buys the small company, and remember, it's been a bad year for transportation. It's been a horrible year for transportation. But if the big company buys the little company, they get the little company's points. So the big companies who have not been so good with their safety and compliance in the past little bit can magically reset and get a refresh just by buying out somebody smaller. So there's incentives for big companies to buy out little companies. This can work out well. There are people who have become millionaires because they have ideas that have been bought out. Once again, Elon Musk has had several ideas that he's been involved with. PayPal that he got bought out of, and he was perfectly happy with it. Nothing wrong with making money that way. The problem is, most people are not in a position to sit back and demand a hefty price. McDonald's will come for your lemonade stand, and they'll put that $20,000 offer on the table once. And they'll say, we're walking if you don't take it. And they will walk. So you got to make the decision then and there. A lot of people are going to go out of business very fast. And it's kind of like genetics. Once you take a certain set of genetics out of existence, for example, a species going extinct, you can't get it back. Once that intellectual property is owned by a Bayer, by a McDonald's, by a Pfizer, by whoever it might be, once it is owned by them, it can be locked up. It can be locked up, the key thrown away, and it will never see the light of day again. And it happens a lot more than you think. The big businesses, while pretending to be in competition against each other, aren't. There was, I forget when this was, in the 90s, I'm pretty sure. And Microsoft was having an antitrust case leveled against it. At one point, the government even proposed splitting Microsoft into three. One would look after the software, one would look after the hardware, and I forget what the third division was supposed to do. It doesn't matter. But Microsoft had an ace up its sleeve. See, Bill Gates, the owner of Microsoft, knew Steve Jobs. They were friends. Or at any rate, they weren't complete enemies. At that point, Apple was absolutely in shambles. They were no longer able to get Motorola processors. They switched over to Intel, meaning they were essentially no different from Microsoft. Just a different flavor. And Microsoft held market dominance. They're about to fold. You might not believe this in 2020, but Apple was very nearly ready to fold. But since Microsoft had trouble, Bill Gates passed some money to his friend, Steve Jobs. Gave him a couple million as a loan, in quotes. There was some sort of a stock equity switch there. But by doing that, Bill Gates was able to point to Apple and say, there's our competition, so you can't sue us for antitrust. We have competition, we are not a monopoly. And now, years later, Apple has a bigger market share. That being said, Bill Gates has really stepped back from Microsoft operations. If he was still young, I imagine Microsoft would still be going strong. But he's decided in his older age to be more charitable, to indulge his other hobbies rather than simply programming at a computer. And he's earned that right. He's made his billions, and now he can sit back and let the company that he built run on autopilot. Meanwhile, Apple always has to be in your face with new advertisements. New iPhone 12, 13, 15, the 20. Maybe it'll be the double X. Who knows? But that money came from Microsoft, and it went to Apple. All for the sake of keeping Bill Gates' company out of court. Can you imagine that? Would McDonald's hand Burger King millions of dollars to keep them afloat? No, they wouldn't do it. But Microsoft and Apple did, because it suited their interests at the time. This was Bill Gates putting a bet that Apple would stay in business. Now, they've since buried this under the table. The stock swap has been canceled. They did financial hand-wavy stuff. Don't ask me, I'm not that much of an expert. Because of that, Apple is theoretically independent of Microsoft again. But I'm sure if the reverse situation happened, Apple would be first in line to help Microsoft. And I've said this before, big companies, they're all interconnected. That's just one example, but Bayer and BASF, I said a couple weeks ago how they were connected through Nazi war crimes. And they're still doing it today, thanks to Monsanto. They have this strange interest in buying marginal companies, shall I say. Profitable companies, but morally marginal. That's because they know how to keep it in the family. We don't live under a monopoly. We live under what's called an oligopoly, which means more than one person is at the front of the line. But they work together to keep themselves ahead of everybody else. And these families have been doing it for over 100 years. The Ford family, for example. Not the Ontario Fords, I mean the United States Michigan Fords. They have managed to run their business so successfully that in 2008, when the government offered bailouts for all the big three, Ford was the only company that said, no, we don't need your money. Ford was also the only company that did not give up any controlling interest to the government. Ford was also the only company that didn't use that money to relocate overseas. GM and Chrysler? No, They took the government money. They said they needed it, and they did. They opened up plants in Brazil, in Argentina, overseas, in Indonesia, Vietnam, all sorts of places. So your tax dollars went to save those companies. And the first thing those companies did was to go overseas, because labor is cheaper. That's how your tax dollars were repaid. And my question always has been, what happened to the government people that were put on the board of directors? These were supposed to be people looking out for our interests. And nope. They managed to pay their loans back, at least relatively so, diversify their assets, and send them overseas. All thanks to your investment through your taxes. How do you feel about that? You saved those jobs, barely, but what did you give up to do it? Future jobs. It was solving a problem now to create a problem later. Now, I don't blame the government for trying this. After all, if I don't like the concept of too big to fail, at the same token, there's some losses that are too big to bear. And if you had lost two of the big three car manufacturers, it would have been a serious problem. But this brings us back to the acres and acres of cars being manufactured and not being sold. Even in this pandemic, this crisis, when nobody's buying cars, their production lines are still open, they're still going at 100%. So what would be the incentive for a big company like that to stockpile millions of cars? Now we're getting into the deficit part of the equation. Big companies don't like to pay taxes. Nobody likes to pay taxes. But big companies employ whole bureaus, whole agencies within themselves just to make sure how they can go about paying the minimum amount of tax possible. I don't fault them for this really, because anybody given a chance would rather not pay tax. It has an important part in our society. We need to pay taxes so that we can have roads, we can have sewers, we can have the infrastructure, because most of the infrastructure is still built by the government and not by private industry. That being said, by having all these millions of cars being manufactured, next year they're going to be able to claim that they operated at a loss this year. They had the chance to keep their workers at home and keep their production low, but no, they chose to go full steam ahead and still produce their daily allotted number of cars. So next year they can take a big financial hit. When you take a big financial hit like that, okay, cars in particular depreciate, so they can spread this hit out over several years. So next year they're going to be able to say, well, these cars started off being worth $30,000. Now we can only sell them for $25,000. So we're going to lose, I have no idea what the real numbers are. So we're going to lose $500,000 in depreciation just off the cars in the region of Michigan. And then they do that across their company, and they can declare billions, if not billions, in profit losses. But it's based off their profit next year. So they've already saved this amount this year to put towards their taxes next year. And they're gambling that next year probably won't be profitable, or if it is, they will still have this big deficit whack to take. Those cars are still sitting there. They can still sell them for scrap metal, whatever it's worth. But for now, they're looking at the future and saying, these are all a write-off for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know how long it takes for a car to properly depreciate. If I had to guess, I would say 7 years, but this isn't a math show. This isn't a learning show. This is a learning show about what goes on behind your back. So, currency speculation. putting aside deficits for the future, not just profits, deficits, so that you can hide details and make things look worse. Let's go back to the idea of speculation, because it's not just currency that you can speculate with. You can speculate in the future of companies. I would be very hard pressed. Well, not very hard pressed, but I would find it difficult to pick next year what the big three automakers would be doing. My guess is this year they're going to call for a big loss. Retail is going to call for a big loss. Everyone's going to call for a big loss. And because of that, next year is going to be very bad. Again, no orders in the system. If we cured everybody of every disease right now, shoved them back into the workforce and said, go at it, everybody, nothing would happen until at least May or June. Not just simply because that's the way the economy works. Input to the economy is money. Output of the economy is goods. For us. At the top levels, money goes in and money comes out. But it's more money coming out than what you put in. So imagine you were looking at Chrysler, GM, Ford, whatever it might be, and you said, I am interested in investing in one of these companies. Would you buy stock? Might be a good idea to buy stock. But a better idea would be to buy futures. Now, what's a future, you say? A future is agreeing to buy a certain amount of product at a certain date. So let's take rice, for example. You agree that you're going to buy 10,000 pounds of rice at the end of next year. And for that, let's say it's $1 a pound for rice. So it's $10,000. Now, since next year, the economy is not going to be very good. The price of rice goes up. So you're sitting on that 10,000 pounds for $10,000. You can turn around and sell it for $20,000. Put $10,000 in your pocket, walk away. You never take delivery of that rice. The big companies are doing this, and the billionaires are doing this all the time. Everyone's looking at the economy and shorting it right now, because shorting it is a smart bet. We know GM, Ford, Chrysler are not going to have very good years next year. We know food companies are going to be okay. They're probably going to get bought up a lot, but they're mostly going to be okay. We know restaurants, they'll probably do better next year, but they're all going to have things to write off from this year. That'll be for several years to come. Restaurants are no different, aside from the small local eateries, and even they can do some financial wizardry. The point is, the money that is being made and the years shown on paper is all being made at the top. You don't have access to this. You can't look at your future and bet whether you're going to go up or down. You can't take your money and gamble it on futures. Well, you can. It just takes a lot more money than you have. And as I mentioned many weeks ago, the important part to all of this is whenever you buy an asset, whenever you buy a debt, whenever you buy a bond, that then becomes an asset that you can claim. So let's say I have that 10,000 pounds of rice. I have $10,000 in bond from Apple, and I have a $10,000 car. That'd be a crappy car. That would be hard to work with, but let's assume that's in there. I now go to the bank, and the bank looks at that and says, you have 3 assets that we can loan against. So we're going to give you $50,000 in credit. You're thinking, hang on a second, how does 30,000 translate to 50,000? Because banks, if you have a good credit rating, if you're a billionaire, if you have money flowing through you constantly, banks look at your assets and they'll give you multiple loans. This is how the the billionaires, the hedge fund managers and stuff like that, this is how they build up their money. They take their $30,000 worth of assets and turn into $50,000 or $60,000, which they go out and purchase more assets, which they can then borrow against. And it's a continual cycle. And when you're in the billionaires club and you have that black credit card or silver, whatever the heck it, the platinum, whatever the really cool one is that they have at the present time, when you're in that club, it's not like you and I going to a bank where we sit down and we have to show that we own a car, we own a house, we own this, that, the other thing. No. They walk in, they basically say, here's my identification. They can plug it in the computer and say, hello, Mr. Gates, what can we do for you today? No, I need $15 million to purchase this company. Yep, here you go. Here's the money in your account. You know, is that on a loan? Is that whatever? And then Bill Gates chooses whatever he's going to do. It's an advantage for billionaires to have loans. Because not only are they getting the advantage of turning $30,000 in assets to $50,000 in money, but as a loan, they can then turn around and use that depreciation on the asset and the interest on the loan to declare on their taxes. Not only for them, but for the businesses they control. If they control more than one business, they can take loans out for each and every single business and make something new out of it. Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, he's done it before in trying to open his own football league. Now, that didn't work out quite the way he expected, but there's reasons for that. Maybe one day I'll go into how not to open a business. But the fact is, he was able to borrow against his own company. He was able to sell off half of his interest in the company, make that money, and still retain controlling interest in his own company. Think about that. It would be like selling half your house, but keeping control of it. It doesn't exist on our level, but billionaires and multinational companies do this all the time. You getting the picture yet? And while these billionaires and trillionaires are going around making their millions and billions and trillions of dollars, and trillions of dollars are being made, we are sitting here trying to save up enough pocket change to go to McDonald's and get a small French fry. That's the difference in the world right now. There's two levels, and one, it's not easy to get promoted to the second level. You can do it. It is possible. You'd have to be extremely disciplined and know exactly what you're doing. Get the opportunities to invest and invest properly. So unless you're 19 years old listening to me and have a really great money manager or a really great nose for opportunities, you're not going to have that opportunity. Because like I said, the big boys, the billionaires, keep their secrets to themselves. They know that McDonald's is not happy with Martin Brower. Martin Brower supplies McDonald's, for the record. And Cisco is bidding for the contract. So the billionaire owners would say, hey, I know Cisco looks like they're going to win it, but Martin Brower is going to come through with an offer that lowers their prices. So this would be a good time to get in on Martin Brower, because they're going to retain that contract and their share prices are going to stay the same. Don't go for Cisco, because when they lose the contract, that's going to look bad on them. This is why so much business takes place on a golf course, or behind closed doors, or at meeting places far overseas away from everybody. It's because that way they can talk in private. Over here, they go to a bar or a pub or whatever. Everybody's listening. Oh my goodness, that's Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Well, that could have been a few years ago. No, they would go to Aspen. They would go to any of the big tourist cities, because over there they can cordon off an entire hotel and have it to themselves. I've been to a couple of these conventions, and you're told these are your floors. Let's say it's floor 20 through 30. And these suites are open for entertainment, hospitality, whatever. You go to those suites, and it's people sharing cocktails, food, whatever you might have it, and talking business. There's some pleasant conversation in there too. Don't get me wrong. These are not business animals I'm talking about. They're human beings. But it's also them getting to know each other, trying to figure out whether they trust each other. And most importantly, what they have to offer one another. And there is politicking going on throughout the room. The big deals are made in those little rooms where you and I won't find out about for months. This big reset, capitalism reset that's coming out, came from just meetings like that. People call it the Bilderberg Conference as a general rule, because the first meeting was in the Bilderberg Hotel back in the 1950s. The same group is still meeting to this very day. And while supposedly it's just a group of like-minded people discussing common interests, the fact is they're people who control the world. They might not have a unified agenda. They might not all be out there for their own selfish reasons. But the fact is, they're there to make themselves a profit. They don't just sit down and discuss redistribution of wealth in Ghana. Don't know why I thought of Ghana there just then, but yeah, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about redistribution of wealth in Ghana to their interest. One person there who's an expert says, hey, in Ghana we have this official. His name is Brian. I don't know any Brians in Ghana. I'm making that one up. And Brian's willing to do business for us for the right price. And so they give their business to Brian. Brian makes sure they get preferential treatment. And Brian retires a multimillionaire to his little estate just because he was willing to play ball with the big boys. And this all takes place at these conferences. Believe me, Coke and Pepsi executives know each other a lot better than you think they do. And I stick with Coke and Pepsi because everybody's had a Coke and a Pepsi at some point in their life. All 7.5 billion people across the planet have at some point put a Coke or a Pepsi in their mouth. Whether it would be a taste test challenge or it was dropped in as relief aid. Yes, let's send them horrible sugar water as relief to starvation. That's another story for another time. But the fact is, these deals are being made day in, day out, week in, week out. And they're not even announced to the public until months later, because we might have a deal and it involves equity in stocks. It involves debt instruments. It involves all these things. So your company's buying mine, or we're doing a merger, but just because we agree to it, okay, you get 60% of the stock, I get 40% of the stock, our lawyers still have to sit down and agree, okay, what is 60% of the stock? Here is the exact figure. What is 40% of the stock? Here is the exact figure. That needs to be codified. So even though we make the deal in January, nothing will get done until April or May at minimum, because the lawyers got to sit down and renegotiate and say, okay, we value your euro at $2 American. So we're going to trade it. Well, no, we want it at $2.50 American. That's not what the market price is today. And you can see how the discussion goes from there. It's a fully logical discussion to have, but it's something that you and I don't necessarily have. I think the closest thing we have at our level would be either trading cards games or fantasy sports leagues. Because trading card games, yeah, you want to trade your card up, so people do trade. But it's simple one-for-one kind of thing. Fantasy sports leagues, well, those are people that are getting together saying, okay, I've got Tom Brady and I'll trade him for Ben Roethlisberger and a first-round pick next year. We negotiate at that level, whereas the sports teams negotiate not only that, they negotiate how much of the contract that you're going to get. So I don't know what Ben Roethlisberger makes off the top of my head. I'm going to pretend it's $20 million a year. So as a team, I'm going to pay $10 million this year because the season's half over. You'll pay the second $10 million, and then you get the rest of his contract. Then we have to declare all that. Plus, you're giving me back a first-round draft pick, but I also want future considerations, which can mean anything from, an 8th-round draft pick to in future when the two of us have a chance to go at the same time. I say, hey, I'm using my future considerations. I get to go first. Simple things like that, but it all has to be codified. And these secret parts of negotiations really need to start being made public. In 1918, when World War I ended, there was a huge concern about secret diplomacy at the time. And the reason was, so many nations had secret clauses in their peace treaties with each other, it destabilized the world. And that's exactly what is happening with our economy at the moment. The very thing that brought about World War I and World War II is infectious in our economy right now. Our economy is rife with problems. And it's precisely because of all these secret dealings that cannot be monitored by people like you and I, and the government chooses not to monitor it because if they make money, they get more taxes. Government makes money from taxes. So, whether it be to prevent a future collapse or to bring this reset into focus, we all need to put our eyes on the prize. Why is it we are not allowed to participate in the bigger economy and we are affected by it in so many ways? When oligopolies pop up, they're able to make the governments do what they want. We, as a people, as shown so horribly in the past 6 years, get divided over the silliest things. I won't even bring up the controversial issues, but let's just look at gun control. I can put any statement on gun control in a forum I like, people are going to go nuts. Do you think the people in the Billionaires Club care about gun control? No, because either they're going to be able to buy the permits or they're going to move to a country where they can do what they want if they want. And that's their opinion on gun control. It's for you. It's not for them. We live in a top-down economy, which means the people at the top command the people at the bottom. Once again, I refer everybody to the spirit of the 1920s when unions first came about. Now, unions are a bit of an obsolete concept, but we need a collective bargaining tool because the politicians are not looking out for us. They're looking out for themselves. So we need to start building a grassroots organization, not to overthrow the government, not to topple anybody, not to hurt anybody, but one that actually represents the people. Because when the people go unrepresented, only violence can result. And take a look through history. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, any revolution you name pretty much ended badly. My purpose here is to prevent a revolution, but still maintain change for people. And that is an impossible task, but one that I'm continuing to devote myself to. We wish to thank you for joining us for the Silverlight Show today. For those of you who wish to support the show, there'll be a link in the description for our set of books. Our library is constantly expanding, and you're always welcome to purchase them. You can borrow them on Kindle, and by all means, everything you do helps the show out. If you like, you leave or subscribe and leave a like on the channel because it always helps. And I don't make any money directly from YouTube, but at the same token, the more people that like this, the more exposure it gets. And that's really my intention, is to get the exposure, to get this information out there. Thank you once again for your time, and have a great day.